What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of Be Shafe Daily Live. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Wednesday evening. That's right, Wednesday evening, May 28th, 2025, as the Cardinals win a series over the Baltimore Orioles. What a series win this was from the Cardinals as they dropped the opening game on Memorial Day Monday. And then the last two nights, they have been the cardiac cards, the comeback cards, the comeback kids, finding ways to come from behind to beat the Orioles in consecutive games. We'll talk about it here on the show. Make sure you drop your thoughts into the live chat if you're joining us here live. If you're listening back the next day via YouTube or via Spotify on the Be Shafe Daily feed, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you may be listening to the show. And make sure to put the notifications on for the YouTube channel so you don't miss the next time that we go live. We are a daily St. Louis Cardinals podcast, and so every single day, more or less, we are doing Cardinals talk here on the channel as we get the comments rolling in from Tupelo, who says, "Go Cards." Chewy mentions a lot of comeback wins lately. That has been the name of the game for this Cardinals team, it seems. Whereas, in years past, it doesn't seem like the Cardinals really had the ability, once they got down by multiple runs especially, to fight back and to come away with games like we saw tonight and games like we saw last night. Now, last night was not a multiple run deficit in game two of the series on Tuesday night, but they had a 3-0 lead in that one and squandered it. We're down 4-3. And so that feels like almost maybe even more of an impressive comeback win where you get punched in the mouth, but you find a way to punch back. That's what was so impressive, I think, about Tuesday's win. And then Wednesday's was impressive because the Cardinals were punched first. I mean, they had to get up off the mat after Miles Mikolas allowed 3 runs in the second inning, was able to settle in for the most part to get through the next couple of innings with minimal damage. He did give up 1 run in the fourth, but it was clutch to see the Cardinals come up with at least something in that fourth inning rally where you had runners at the corners, I believe, with nobody out, and you weren't able to get the runs home. I think Contreras had a strikeout or a key out there, and the lineup continues to move down. It gets to Jordan Walker with 2 outs, and you had to find a way to cash in something to get the team feeling like, hey, this is going to be another one of those nights. This is going to be another one of those games where we come from behind, we defy the odds, whatever the narrative you want to craft. The Cardinals were able to do it. I think Jordan Walker's key hit there in that inning to be able to put up a couple of runs was huge, because if you squander that opportunity, I don't know if the team necessarily, I'm not going to count them out to do so, but I don't know necessarily that the Cardinals would have had the same ability to get up off the mat again. You have to be able to cash in on opportunities like that in the fourth inning, and they do. And then, of course, it was Brendan Donovan's big swing in the fifth inning that actually put the Cardinals ahead in the game. And how about that bullpen tonight that the Cardinals were able to ride through 5 innings of relief and find a way to win this game after Miles Mikolas maybe didn't have his best stuff. I think he's allowed an off night every once in a while because he had been rock solid for the Cardinals of late, lowering the ERA to 3.51 before this game. So the fact that he was able to get it to that point, and then tonight maybe not have his best stuff, but the bullpen comes from a place of, hey, you got the off day on Thursday. Oli Marmol is going to aggressively manage his bullpen tonight as a result of that, which I think made a whole heck of a lot of sense. And that's what you got from the Cardinals tonight, as a whole host of relievers came through in the clutch. I saw some commentary tonight on social about Kyle Leahy maybe not having his best stuff, and I think that's fair. It's very uncharacteristic to see him walk multiple batters as we saw tonight, and was able to work out of that jam, though. That was the key of the situation. And then he also pitched into the following inning but gave up a hit, and that's when they go to John King. And I think that was maybe the best we've seen John King in some time. Phil Maton was on his game as well with a couple of strikeouts and a scoreless appearance. Jojo Romero was good. And then Ryan Helsley, you always have to have a sprinkle of doubt there in the ninth inning, I suppose, but he was able to get the job done and get another save for the Cardinals, his 12th of the season. It was just a really good all-the-way around win, and that's really been the story of things recently for the Cardinals. I'm going to check out the comments here and see what folks are talking about tonight, as Trevor mentions the happy flight to Texas, certainly 4-hour drive to Arlington for C. Ramirez, so I suppose they'll be at the upcoming series. It starts on Friday night. The Cardinals will finally not have to worry when it comes to the idea of rain in the forecast, because, of course, the stadium there in Arlington is covered with a roof. And so for once, it seems recently the Cardinals have just been dodging raindrops. They won't have to worry about that. Seth asks this question. Hello, do you think the team will add at the deadline? And I'm about sick and tired of this sorry-ass schedule the Cubs are playing. Yes, I tried to tell people and warn everybody that this was going to be the case, that you just had to get used to the Cubs are not going to lose very many games between about May the 12th and June the 6th when they finally play a team with a winning record. That's going to be the Tigers on June 6th that the Cubs face off against Detroit. And until that time, the Cardinals are going to be basically just trying to tread water against the Cubs because they are going to win, and they are going to win in volume, in bulk. Scrolling out this schedule right now and make sure I have the timeline correct. Yeah, it was May the 12th that the Cubs opened a series with the Marlins. They went 2 out of 3 in that series. They proceeded to sweep the White Sox, so that's 5 of 6. They took another 2 out of 3 from the Marlins thereafter to make it 7 of 9. And then it was a series against the Reds, who are the best teams that the Cubs will see during this stretch. They won 2 of those 3 to make it 9 of 12, doing this math on the fly. And then we saw the Cubs wrap up a sweep today against the Rockies. So the Cubs have now won 12 of their last 15. That's not too far off from what I predicted would happen over the span between the 12th of May and the 6th of June, where I predicted the Cubs would go 18-7. But I actually said that number without even counting up the number of games that they would play in that stretch. So they've got 6 more remaining. So they don't quite play 25 games against the lowly opponents, but there's, in the neighborhood of 21 or so, and they're going to have a really good winning percentage. Ignore it. Don't worry about the standings right now. What you can believe in for the Cardinals is the record they're putting together. And the Cardinals haven't lost but one series. It was the series against Detroit that they didn't get the win. That was their only series loss since April the 23rd, I believe, the finale against Atlanta. So the Cardinals have been rolling for more than a month now, at least splitting or winning every series other than that Tigers series where they came pretty close to winning it. So I just wouldn't panic about really anything right now with regard to the standings. The Cardinals are 3 games back of the Cubs. If you can end up on June the 6th, like 4 or 5 games back, I would actually still take that, even though that feels like you've lost ground because you have. The Cubs are getting the easiest portion of the schedule that they will have all season long, and it's going to pump up their win totals. They're going to come back down to earth, I think, a little bit once they have to play some actual big league competition. But it's crazy the degree to which that stretch for the Cubs is so darn attainable and winnable. I want to welcome you in. If you're just joining the stream, make sure you hit that subscribe button on the channel here. And for daily St. Louis Cardinals content, you can find that always at this channel. Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer on YouTube. Let's get back into the question that Seth asked, though. The other part of his question, are they going to add at the deadline? I don't really think they are. I don't necessarily see where they would add. Right now, obviously, there's still room for interpretation on that and room to see like what injuries might come about and what the needs would be at the deadline. But right now, I just don't necessarily anticipate, as Wanda asking a very similar question, buyers or sellers at the deadline. Look, I think the Cardinals are winning their way into a conversation where they're not going to be able to sell. They're not going to be able to trade away these pieces because they could very well be right in the thick of a race. And I think you can get Cardinals fans on board with the idea of a modified retool of a transition year where by virtue of not adding to anything in the offseason, you're not spending on big contracts in free agency. You're going to roll out the guys who you've got because you want to see what they're capable of doing. Cardinals fans clearly have adjusted to that and we're on board with it, I think, before the opening day even arrived. I think through spring training, Cardinals fans said, all right, this is going to be the deal. I may not be thrilled about it, but I understand it. And I also, as a Cardinals fan, like you're thinking through this as a fan, would say, well, I also have noticed the trend of them letting players go, young players that maybe didn't get to shine here in St. Louis, and they go elsewhere and get that opportunity. And I'm tired of seeing that. Like that might have been your standpoint to where you were on board with the Cardinals giving the runway, if you will, to a lot of these young players. And so you might have been on board with that. But now you're seeing the Cardinals win, and they're winning with that strategy more or less. I know that they're not playing Gorman and Walker every single day and that they've kind of turned Herrera into more of a part-time catcher than a full-time catcher. And so the runway concept has certainly seen adaptions since the beginning of the year. But at the same time, the Cardinals are winning with the process that they were hoping would be successful sooner rather than later in terms of a transition and a retool. They're basically saying, look, the core of talent that we have, we don't need to tear this thing down to the studs. Because we're showing you right now with what we had, basically not trying to prioritize building of the roster in the offseason at all. We're rolling out there and winning games. So with the Cardinals able to do that and they're competing and contending, I just don't think it would be something you can sell to the fan base of, hey, you were patient for multiple years. through a process. You are willing to undergo a bit of a retool and a transition with us, and the fans are starting to file back into the ballpark. I'm telling you, as I've said all along, when the Cardinals return next week, I think it's the Royals and the Dodgers coming to town. That will be a Busch Stadium that looks different than it's looked all year. The fans will be there. I have a lot of confidence in that. It's premier opponents. It's hopefully better weather because you're into the month of June. It's the state of the way that the team has been playing as one of the hottest clubs in baseball. I think you're going to get Cardinals fans back to the ballpark, no doubt about it. And we're going to see it during that homestand. So all of this being considered, to the question that Wanda asks and the one from Seth as well, I don't think they can sell. And that might mean holding on to Ryan Helsley. And that might mean offering him a qualifying offer at the end of the season and being comfortable if he does accept it, but kind of banking on the idea that he won't because he's chasing an Edwin Diaz or a Josh Hader caliber contract, which is in the neighborhood of, upwards of $90 million potentially if he can get a fifth year at his age. I do think it's a plausibility if Helsley can finish the season healthy. So they're maybe going to have to adapt what they thought the trade deadline was going to look like, but that is for the better. Believe me, I think the St. Louis Cardinals, from ownership on down, are going to be comfortable with the idea that, hey, we're winning too much, so we can't sell like we figured we might have to. Because the sell was honestly going to be very limited in scope. It was going to be Ryan Helsley. It was going to be Eric Fetty, and anything else you could get for the short-term contracts. Maybe they signed Maton thinking they could flip him at the deadline if they weren't as competitive as they hoped to be. And they had to prepare to not be competitive because they didn't sign anybody in the offseason. They didn't make any notable trades. They just kind of ran it back with lesser players, lesser proven players, because they weren't bringing back Kyle Gibson. They weren't bringing back Lance Lynn. They weren't bringing back Goldie. And so without those guys, it's not to say that the internal options couldn't outperform those guys. I think what we're seeing right now is that's exactly what's happening. But you couldn't necessarily bank on it. And so with that being the sort of crux and the genesis of where the Cardinals were coming into this season, you sort of had in the back of your head, the trade deadline could look like a sell-off. That is a possibility of what could come to pass. Like, let's all be adults about it and say, yeah, if they're on a pace to win 75 games, maybe they win 70 instead because they sell off a couple of those short-term assets of value. People probably in February were not thinking about Miles Mikolas and Steven Matz being guys on expiring deals with any such trade value come July, but I think those have materialized. Certainly in the case of Matz, and I think you would count Mikolas as well as somebody that there might actually be some value to him, maybe not a lot, and he's got the no trade, so he would have to answer to that as well. And then the conversation, too, of, we didn't trade Arenado in the offseason like we planned, but we can trade him in July if, those opportunities come about, and maybe Sonny Gray, maybe Contreras, maybe you would have gone even further. If the Cardinals were really losing and they said, we got to tear this thing down completely, you start to think about, is this a team that can be fit to win within a couple of years before you're set to lose guys like Nootbaar and Donovan in free agency? I think everything was on the table coming into the year for the way that this could have played out. Right now, we're seeing that there's a lot more talent in this system, and not just the system, but at the major league level already than people might have anticipated. And so as a result of that, you don't really need to change anything. You don't necessarily, you always want to restock the system with prospects, but it doesn't need to be quite the jolt that the Cardinals thought could maybe come at the deadline by trading Ryan Helsley for multiple prospects. You don't necessarily need it. What are the needs of this team at the deadline if it's a buyer? Offensively, I don't think you have a single need. As long as the team stays healthy as it's constructed, I don't think you have a situation where you're going out and trading for somebody that's going to fill an everyday lineup spot. It's quite the opposite right now. The Cardinals have 11 guys on a daily basis that they're trying to prioritize playing time for. Basically, if you're wondering who the 11 are, there's 13 position players on the roster. Pozo and Barrero are not part of the 11. All the other 11 are, and those are guys that they want to see playing as often as possible in variations of that truth. They're going to be strategic. Tonight it was a lefty on the mound, Cade Povich. They didn't put Gorman in the lineup. They didn't put Burleson in the lineup. And there was an opportunity maybe in the middle of that game where folks would have liked to have seen Oliver Marmol pinch hit Burleson after Cade Povich went out of the game for Pedro Pages in a key spot. And he didn't do it because, as Oliver Marmol continues to show you, and as the Cardinals continue to show you, Pedro Pages is not only their starter, but he is their finisher behind the plate. And there's nobody they would rather have in a tight game late than Pedro Pages. And I think that aspect of it, maybe Cardinals fans see more of the offensive numbers from the catcher spot and think that should be the priority. The Cardinals are continuing to show you with their actions that the priority is the defense from the catcher position. They want Pedro Pages to turn into a good hitter. That would be great. That would be a nice, wonderful bonus, but it's not the main driving factor in who's going to get the playing time behind the plate. Herrera's going to play, but he's just going to play as a DH. And that might mean a more difficult path to everyday playing time for guys like Burleson, guys like Gorman, and even guys like Jordan Walker. But he's playing a lot better recently. And so I think the Cardinals, in keeping with also his defense being a major upgrade from where it has been, I think the Cardinals are in a position to where they're trying to will Jordan Walker's bat into the lineup as well. Again, like I said, he had 3 strikeouts tonight, but he also had the key swing that I think was sort of the stabilizer for this Cardinals team. So you're getting a lot of those things that I think are incredibly valuable. I can't see them going out and trading for a bat because I don't really think they need one. Barring injuries, you're going to continue to play the guys that you're playing right now because there's more than 9 of those on a nightly basis. And so you're just going to continue to prioritize those. Starting pitching-wise, Michael McGreevy, I don't know if I can play the sounder for Down on the Farm. I might need to figure out on StreamYard a way to add just some little, we need a little Down on the Farm video, I think is the deal. Because I would be able to just roll that right in there, and that would be great. I don't know if it's something that I can necessarily do on the fly, but I will try for the next stream to have that. My point was Michael McGreevy pitching really well. He had 6 innings of 1-run baseball, I believe it was tonight, with 9 strikeouts. And so you're talking about a rotation that has 5 guys that they feel pretty good about. I know that Michaelis and Palante are more like a 4 and a 5, but they're performing as a 4 and a 5 in what a contending rotation would be. So this is a contending rotation as I see it. And if and when you should have an injury, because it's bound to happen eventually, Michael McGreevy is a guy that you're very excited to put into that spot. Now, another injury should happen, then maybe you're talking about trying to buy some starting pitching. But I don't think the Cardinals are necessarily in a situation, unless they really do overtake the Cubs, and then you can start to think about the way that they would line up against teams like the Dodgers and the Padres and the Phillies and the Mets in the actual MLB postseason. I don't necessarily think the Cardinals are thinking about buying their way to bolster, because they largely have a roster that fits together pretty well. You could always afford to buy another reliever, but I also think we're seeing a bullpen right now that is pretty productive. So that's my long answer to question from Seth and Wanda about the Cardinals at the deadline. I think they'll more or less hold if the trends continue the way that they're continuing right now, with the Cardinals on a pace for better than 90 wins. They're on a pace where I would expect this team to be playoff bound with the way that they are performing right now. I guess I should take a look at the standings to see where they would be. I still think they are just on the outside, or no, they would have overtaken the Giants as of this moment, a game ahead of the Giants. They'd be a half game or so, maybe just percentage points behind the Padres for 1 wild card spot, behind the Mets for another, but the Cardinals would be the 3rd wild card as of this moment. So certainly this is a team that I think is worth investing in. I just don't know the way that would come. How would that materialize with a front office that's basically in transition toward the future? Now, if you're Mozeliak, you're like, shoot, I don't care what happens after this. I'm going to try to win now. You could take that approach. I think you would do that with some caution, though. I think you would say, if there's a really meaningful way to add, we could do that. We could explore that as the Cardinals. But we've got to find payoff if we're doing it. If we're trading from the future to invest in the now, it's certainly a gamble because we know that the National League is pretty loaded. And so your advance rate in the playoffs, what's that going to look like, is maybe a difficult proposition. But I would also look at this Cardinals team and say they've got the knack 1 through 9 to be able to go up against the pitchers on the other side and get to these guys. You know, what has impressed me the most about the way that they're winning these games recently is they might not get to a starter in the first few innings, but by the time that they get to the middle innings against him, they're wearing that guy down and finding a way to break through. And then they're chasing him from the game the way that they did tonight against Povich. Cardinals struck out 16 times in the game. Struck out a bunch against Povich 9 times. Struck about a bunch against the bullpen, which included Matt Bowman and Andrew Kittredge, the former Cardinals party tonight. And then Sir Anthony Dominguez was really good out of their bullpen tonight. That's the kind of guy that I would love to trade for at the deadline if you're talking about a bullpen arm on the cheap, because he's got a 5.3 ERA, but we know the stuff is really good. And he's got some postseason experience. So that's an interesting name I think would be to monitor. But the Cardinals struck out a bunch, and yet they found a way to get to Povich eventually with the big-time swings. Brendan Donovan's swing left on left was incredibly impressive. What the top of that order has done, Nootbaar, Mason Wynn, Brendan Donovan have been just jump-starting this thing. And now we're seeing other guys like Wilson Contreras, Victor Scott II, in a little bit of a downturn offensively. And yet, you hardly even really notice it, because usually 6 or 7 guys in a given night are going to be producing and coming up with key swings, and that's exactly what you have right now, where you can carry a couple of guys that are kind of struggling and trying to find themselves. Because next week, it'll be 2 different guys that are maybe in a bit of a downturn, and Contreras will be carrying you again. I think that's the belief around this Cardinals team, and it's been able to hold up so far. So I just don't think they can sell. And that's going to maybe be a difficult conversation because you could be leaving prospects on the table in terms of guys like Ryan Helsley. But hey, you're a contending team that might need those players, and that might just have to be good enough. And I think the Cardinals front office and ownership would be willing to make that adjustment to what they would have previously planned, because it's probably going to mean a boost in attendance, a boost in fan support, and something that allows them to jumpstart this franchise a lot sooner than maybe they had expected. Others still talking about the concept of trading Helsley. Tupelo was not opposed to it. He's good, but seems to make things shaky. That's true, but it's a bottom line job when you're the closing pitcher, and more often than not, he is at least getting the save. Chewy mentioning that the bullpen has been good recently. Tyler wanting to know the last time the Cardinals were 8 games above 500. That is a pretty good question. I don't know the answer to it, and it would take me too long to look up. So if anybody has that, you can feel free to drop it into the chat. But certainly, it seems like it's been a minute, right, since the Cardinals have really been in this situation. Jordan Walker's batting average slowly creeping up to a respectable number. Yeah, he's been doing some really impressive things, and the run that he is on, I might take a look at that. That's something that I probably could go ahead and find here pretty quickly, at least prior to today. And I know today that he was 1 for 4, so he didn't necessarily raise the batting average there. Let's go ahead and click to start the doubleheader in Philadelphia as where we're going to base all of this off of, and see what the run from Walker has been since then. It's about exactly a 2-week span. And of course, the moment that I need it most, Baseball Reference wants to give me a spinning wheel and not give me the information that I need. But he has raised his number. There it is, a 906 OPS over the past 2 weeks, and that is prior to tonight. So a 344 batting average, has not been taking walks and has still been striking out a fair amount, but the hard hit data is up. The extra base hits are up, and certainly the clutch swings have come up as he's got 11 RBIs over the past couple of weeks. Really good stuff to see from Walker. Very curious to see 2 weeks down the road what that ends up looking like. Henry, I'm going to get to your question now. What do you believe about this team being a contender? People who have bought into this team know that they win this division, at the very least make the wild card. They will make a playoff spot in 2025. 12-25, says Henry, who has been pretty steadfast that he thinks the Cardinals can win the World Series this year. Look, I came into the year saying I thought the Cardinals could be a team that wins 84 games. 83, 84 was about my number. Clearly, as somebody who, covers the Cardinals and follows it pretty closely, I was selling them short of what I think now that they are capable of doing. Excuse me, because I believe that the Cardinals are on a pace well above 90 right now. Are they going to get to 90? Maybe, maybe not, but 88, 89, I think is well within range. And heck, they could definitely get to 90. They've had very fortunate luck when it comes to pitching health, and so that's going to be something that they'll need to maintain, I think, to stay on the level that they're at. But I would also make the case that as good as the Cardinals' offense has been, we still haven't really seen everybody rolling at once. And maybe we never will, because that's a hard thing to ask a team to do. But I would also say that, there's still maybe more in the tank for some of these guys offensively. Like, if you ask me, season end, is Contreras a 689 OPS, or is he higher than that? I would say he's going to be above that. Higher or lower on Arenado, 702. I would go above that. Higher or lower on Walker's 583 OPS. I would go above that. Victor Scott II at 694. I might fade that one. Victor might come back down to earth a little bit. It's a tough thing, especially for a young player who has not been through the rigors of a full MLB season just yet, and what that looks like through 162 games. They are running him out there a ton in center field, and for defensive reasons, I think that makes a lot of sense. But it wouldn't shock me if he was maybe still a sub 700 OPS guy for the year, and then next year would make another leap similar to what we have seen from Mason Wynn, where, cup of coffee for Wynn, struggled a couple of years ago down the stretch, but it was just about getting him an opportunity. Last year, he kind of understood the rigors of what that MLB season looked like for the first time, saw the numbers dip a little bit at the end, but now in year 3, if you will, we're seeing Mason Wynn up to a 795 OPS. I think Victor could make a similar leap next year, and we could even see that growth from him this season. But he is down to a 694 OPS, but he's your number 9 hitter. I think that's more than something you're happy to live with, given that's close to league average production offensively, and obviously one of the best defensive center fielders. If the Cardinals keep running him out there, he may well win a Gold Glove this year. So he has been pretty good at the handling of the center field position. Bryn believes that it's a 90-win team as constructed. Feeling pretty good about that. Yep, and that's the pace that they're on. They're on a better pace than that, actually. Eric says, I'll take your 4 of 5, having one bad start once every other month. That's pretty good. Yeah, he's talking about Michaelis, talking about Palante. These guys are your back-end rotation guys. Now, granted, you can't say that about everyone, because then eventually you would ask, well, who's your top-end guys? And Fetty is sort of, I think, your number 3 in the way that we're aligning the hierarchy right now. And he's had some good with some bad. And maybe he's a little underwhelming as a 3, but gosh, his ERA is 3.9. Michaelis is 3.9, and Palante is around 4.2. Sonny Gray's a higher ERA than what it feels like because he's going to give you the really good starts. And then there have been just a couple of clunkers mixed in that have contributed to maybe some lesser stats there. But he's got a 4.0 ERA, and we're going to see him coming up in game 2 of that series in Texas. And then tomorrow, the ace, or pardon me, Friday, the ace Matthew Liberatore, right, is going to get his opportunity. So, yeah, he's been fantastic. Liberatore to me right now, and I mentioned as well, as we talked about it on the Sports Hub post game, which you should go check out if you haven't seen it just yet. After you're done with this, you can go watch that one for more Cardinals talk. And we talked about it on the KTGR Big Show this afternoon. I think the Cardinals have a couple of guys that I believe are deserving of being all-stars. It's Brendan Donovan and it's Matthew Liberatore. Right now, I don't know that there's anybody else that I would predict will be one. Mason Wynn can play his way into that. Tonight, raising his OPS pretty significantly puts him on a good path, and that elite shortstop defense, I think, is another plus in his pocket. And he's also that flair for the dramatic type of player, young player that baseball should want to highlight. I don't know how much that plays into it when the managers and coaching staffs are selecting the players that will be in there, but I would say that Mason Wynn could certainly play himself into an opportunity. But I think Brendan Donovan and Liberatore is maybe the one that nobody would have seen coming, but I think is certainly deserving. Eric mentioning as well that the Cardinals have some legit good catching prospects at AAA and AA. No need to rush and let Pages keep going unless Crooks at Memphis shows he's ready. Yep, I think that's the way it's going to go. I don't expect that we'll see Jimmy Crooks this year. And then we'll come into spring next year with maybe a different dynamic. Will Herrera still be in the conversation as a catcher, or will he shift positions to right field, to first base, or maybe to just full-time DH? Like, what does that end up looking like? We'll know a little bit more about that come February. And then I think there's more clarity on where the opportunity could come for Crooks. But the Cardinals like Pages. And if he could develop into a guy with just a 650 OPS, that would be enough. Right now he's at 614, so his numbers have definitely been declining recently. But again, 650 OPS is around what he has been for a career, and I think the Cardinals would more than be accepting of that. We'll answer a few more questions here before we hop out on tonight's episode of Be Safe Daily Live. Make sure you do hit that subscribe button before you get out of here, but we've still got a little bit of ways to go. Joseph asking if they do go to a 6-man rotation, will they use Matz or McGreevy? I don't anticipate they will go to a 6-man rotation, at least not necessarily super imminently. And if they do, I would expect it would be McGreevy. I think Matz has carved out, fair or unfair to him, a role in the bullpen that has made him just hyper necessary in the role that he's in, where you don't necessarily want to take him away from that, because I think he's the most trusted lefty that Oliver Marmol has. I think he has leapt over Jojo Romero and John King, who are both pitching well right now, by the way. But I definitely think Steven Matz has turned himself into a versatile kind of like prime Andrew Miller type that can go multiples, can shut down one lefty if you need him. He has been a utility knife for Ollie, and I don't know if the Cardinals want to give that up, especially when you have a guy that you're eager to get into the rotation as well. The Texas series is going to happen. Then there's going to be an off day on Monday. Could I see by the weekend of June 6th through 8th when they're playing the Dodgers, could I see the Cardinals maybe modify and throw an extra start in there to give some of their veteran starters another day of rest? Yeah, that's actually a possibility. It's a good question, Joe. A little more timely than I realized, because I thought about all the off days the Cardinals had coming up, and they actually have 2 of the next 5 off. So if you wondered, taking Michaelis out after 72 pitches in 4 innings tonight, that's why you can afford to do that, because they know that they've got some rest coming, and one of those such days will come tomorrow. But as you get to June the 3rd, the Cardinals will then have a stretch of about 12 days in a row, 13 days in a row with a game. And so as a result of that, you're going to potentially see maybe a modification, maybe not, because it works really well to have a full bullpen, but it also, I think the Cardinals believe that a big reason that their starters have stayed so healthy is because of the way that they are managing them and giving them those extra days of rest throughout the season. But to answer Joe's question, I think it'll be McGreevy. You're going to see McGreevy come up if the Cardinals do decide to go back to a 6-man rotation for a turn or two, which I think the schedule may call for June 3rd through the 15th. So we'll see if they decide to do it then. And look, then there's another pretty lengthy stint. The month of June only has, after this Monday, June 2nd, only has that one off day. It's the 16th, a Monday. The Cardinals play every Thursday in June, which is a big change compared to what they've been doing in the month of May. The 17th through the 2nd of July, the Cardinals also do not have an off day. So, yeah, I definitely think you could see a fair bit of Michael McGreevy in the month of June. I would almost be surprised if we don't see him make at least a couple of starts. I'm glad that was asked because that wasn't really something I was looking at, but it makes a lot of sense and is something that is worth discussing. A few more questions here before we get out of here. Jordan has been great hitting the past couple of weeks. The defense has been greatly improved. And there have been moments where that's not been the case. I mean, there was a play in the series, trying to think back if this was over the weekend against Arizona, I believe. Yeah, when Walker had the play in right field where he got a little too eager, tried to make a great play, and then allowed the ball to get by him. But then he comes back offensively later on in that game and is a big reason the Cardinals win. So that's great to see. Spencer asking about Sajasi. We'll see him eventually, but it's not time for it yet. I think he'll be a September call-up, but right now it's about getting him everyday opportunities and continuing to develop, because if he came up here, he just wouldn't be playing. So basically the question on Sajasi from Spence, if there's an injury to the right position group, you'll see him because he can assimilate into the lineup more regularly, or it'll probably come in September when you're basically all hands on deck and happy to have as many of those talented players as they'll allow you, which I think will be 28. So they've got 26. They'll be able to add 2 more, and I think Sajasi would be a good candidate for that if that time should come. Take a quick drink here and look at a few more of these comments. Mosaic deserves his flowers for the Maton signing and for coming out this spring and saying we believe in Liberatore. Yep, that was a gutsy thing to do, but I think it was the right thing to do, right? In a year where the Cardinals are talking about prioritizing development and prioritizing runway for guys that they're not sure what the future looks like, Liberatore was maybe the primary candidate for that on the pitching side, where everybody had assumed he's a reliever, right? But he has continued to insist, no, I'm a starter. What's the best way to figure that out? Roll him out there and see, because he earned the chance to have that happen in spring. And you are an organization that benefits from this choice if he ends up being able to hold down a starting role, because that's more valuable than what he would be doing as a reliever. And lo and behold, it's happening. If he stays healthy, I think he'll be in the rotation for years to come. And frankly, he is the single most valuable pitching asset in this organization, bar none. More than any prospect, more than anybody, because he's got years of control and he's looking like a top flight starter after all these years. So yeah, good points there from Eric. Jeff says, weren't we 8 games above last May or June? Definitely a possibility, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't been able to check that as I'm doing this live. Sam says, do you think fan attendance will be on the rise? I'm going to the Dodgers series. I bet it's packed. Yep. I think that whole homestand is going to be packed. And really going back to the last holiday weekend against Arizona, you had 31,000 plus, 34,000 plus for all of those games. It's going to look even better. I think you'll get 35,000 plus for certainly that Dodgers weekend. You might even be pushing 37, 38,000. And I would say even the weekday series games against the Royals are going to see good attendance if the weather cooperates. That is a caveat there because I don't know what the long-range forecast is. But yeah, I've been saying it for weeks. You're going to see it when the weather turns and when school is out. It's going to coincide seemingly with the Cardinals playing great ball, and that's really what we're getting right now. Tyler says, I ended up looking it up. They are 8 games above 500 in July of 22. I would have to hesitate to believe it didn't happen at all last year, but maybe not because they started so slow. So we'll go back and look at that if that was the case for according to Tyler, because that would be a long time ago if that were the case. But we know 2023 it probably never happened. Yeah, Tyler, brother, I love you, but that's not a factual stat. In 2022, the Cardinals finished 24 games above 500, right? So it wouldn't be July of 22. So this was the stat. This is not the case. All respect to Tyler, but that can't possibly be, because in 2022, the Cardinals were 93 and 69. I mean, they finished the year way better than 8 games up. Henry says, not trying to be that guy, just want to see a fun run in the playoffs and want to be clear. Love the coverage and commentary. Thank you for taking the question. Yeah, no problem, my brother. Jen says the best we'll see from Michael is he's going to be back to giving up 4 to 5 per 5 innings. Well, I mean, he had a long run where I think he has afforded you the potential that happens, because ultimately I think that Michaelis has a 3.9 ERA on the season, and that's more than enough from the role that he is filling in the rotation. So you feel pretty good about that. 93 wins. That's the first time they did it in a while. Yeah, so 93 wins in June in 2022. We know that was they finished that year better than 8 games above 500. I don't know if it happened last year. That was really the end-all be-all question surrounding that. If Gorman is sent down, it will be to offer, or it'll be after the All-Star break, or maybe after the trade deadline. Yeah, I don't think right now, Jeff, that they need to send down Gorman. It would obviously be better to get guys daily at bats. But Gorman he had the triple the other night. I think they're going to selectively give him opportunities. Darren talking about the same concept. I think they're going to selectively continue to give Gorman opportunities. I don't think they are close right now to sending him down. Eric says that Leahy should be a all-star as well, but that's probably picking nits. You know what? I think Leahy would have been on track when the ERA was down close to 1, but now that it's above 2, that's a tough road to hoe for a middle reliever. Joseph wants to see Tekoa Roby as a reliever in the big leagues this year. I think they'll be a little bit more cautious about activating him and moving him up the ladder so quickly, but I do think Roby should probably end up in AAA by midsummer, and then you can determine from there what his capabilities are. Jeff saying he doesn't like to see McGreevy wasting bullets in Memphis. He's going to make 12-plus starts this year for the Cardinals at least. That's still my opinion. Don't know how it happens, but I do think that is something that we will ultimately see. A lot of people kind of mentioning that last June they might have had an 8-game above 500. I'm going to have to go look this up after. Yeah, don't be using AI. AI is not going to be right hardly ever. Sorry, but that's just the reality of it. Let's end with this. News with Nick says it's really looking like Mo is solidifying his legacy in the face of the haters. He has made huge strides in the final couple of years to prepare this team to be good for a long time. I don't know that he's done it in the final couple of years, but I think the decision that the Cardinals were almost forced into this offseason, which was, hey, in coalescence with needing to spend less money on the roster, we're going to do some things from infrastructure standpoint, and that's going to lead to just seeing if the players that we have are any good. And this 2025 season will tell us how far away are we really as an organization from contending. And it turns out apparently not that far because they're doing it right now in the present. And I think that is pretty significant. So it's definitely good to see that the Cardinals are taking the guys that they had as internal candidates and they're doing a lot with them. It's been very good to see. And hopefully it's something that they are able to continue. I think Space is going to be our real last comment, saying the broadcast the other night said the highest they've gotten in a couple of years was 6 above 500. So that was probably maybe last year when they did that. But I'll look that up after the show, and maybe I'll tweet about it if it's different than what I just told you guys it was. Great to see everybody again. Great to see you too, Jeff. And make sure to hit the subscribe button before you leave out of here. And if you're a listener on Spotify as well, hit follow on Be Safe Daily, because we're bringing you daily Cardinals content all season long. And this could end up being, as I predicted it would be, a season worth following. I didn't know why it would be. I just knew that it would be. I knew that it would either be compelling because they're selling at the deadline and we're finding out about some of these young players, or compelling because they're outperforming expectations and they're in it for the long haul. Right now, it's looking like the latter. We'll see as time goes on if that is the case. That, though, is going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you next time on Be Safe Daily. Peace.